the stones are immense, and some of them were cut from a quarry that's hundreds of miles away.
The granite in the Great Pyramid comes from more than 500 miles to the south, are all made with gigantic granite blocks.
They say ancient Egyptians used copper tools and sand to cut granite.
I want to scale this up to see what is at an industrial scale. Can the stuff, because we know you can kind of calculate how many blocks, how much granite was cut.
But what if I told you their most precise stonework outperforms today's industrial machines? One artifact shows spiral grooves too perfect for hand tools.
From that and analyzing that, you can determine a few things. Things like how fast was this drill, or how quickly was this drill penetrating the granite.
And the deeper you look, the more the story unravels. Because once you see core number 7, you'll realize
the strongest metal tools the Egyptians had were copper. And copper is quite soft. And if the ancient Egyptians had diamond cutting technology, well then history would have to be rewritten.
the past didn't just build pyramids. It hid a technology we still can't explain. Inside the granite, the marks that should not exist. The real mystery behind ancient Egyptian stone cutting doesn't begin in a desert quarry or a hidden tomb. It begins inside a museum filled with artifacts everyone walks past without noticing. One of these objects is an unfinished granite box carved from a single block of red Aswan granite.
Purely to make the primary cuts on that block of granite. So assume you quarry the granite, takes God knows how long, but just to make like the north, south, east, west, top and bottom cuts, right, to shape the box.
At first glance, it looks like a half-completed sarcophagus. But the moment researchers looked inside, their entire understanding of ancient stoneworking began to fall apart. The inner walls weren't rough, chiseled, or randomly tapered the way copper chisels and sandstone abrasives would normally leave them. Instead, they displayed perfectly spaced spiral grooves, running in a continuous pattern that wrapped around the entire chamber like the inside of a machined pipe. These grooves were so uniform that when engineers placed laser-straight gauges across the surfaces, the light reflected in a way that matched the behavior of modern mechanically cut granite. Even more confusing, the striations weren't the shallow scratches produced by slow hand abrasion. They were deep, cleanly formed, and descending in a constant spiral, the signature of a rotating tubular drill biting into the stone with steady torque. The problem? According to mainstream archaeology, this object was carved thousands of years before iron drills, steel tools, or rotary machinery existed. The shock deepened when the team studied drill cores collected by Flinders Petri in the 19th century. These cores revealed a cutting rate of 1/10 of an inch per revolution, something even diamond-tipped drills today struggle to achieve without industrial pressure. The grooves were consistent, showing no wobble, no hesitation, no random deviation. The exact behavior of a tool guided by stable mechanical force, not human hands. When modern engineers attempted to replicate the cuts using copper tubes packed with quartz sand, their experiments failed spectacularly. After hours of grinding, they could barely penetrate a few millimeters into the granite, and the surfaces they produced were rough, inconsistent, and nothing like the mirror-smooth inner walls of the ancient box. Scientists tried to explain the discrepancy by proposing that early Egyptians used harder abrasives like emery, corundum, or crushed quartz. But the microscopic grooves still showed controlled descent rates that no loose abrasive slurry could replicate. Even more surprising, the spiral pattern sometimes changed spacing mid-cut, as if the ancient tool operator adjusted pressure or speed, something only possible with a powered device. The artifact didn't just challenge the official story, it shattered it. The granite tube that shouldn't exist, Petri's core number 7. If there's one piece of physical evidence that throws the conventional narrative into chaos, it's core number 7, a short granite cylinder removed during the 19th century by Sir William Flinders Petri from the Giza Plateau. At a glance, it looks like nothing more than a rough stone plug.
This core seems to have been drilled out of solid granite using a rapidly rotating drill.
But under a microscope, it reveals something that continues to stun engineers over a century later. A spiral groove etched into solid granite, descending with such precision and depth that it mimics the path of a modern core drill. And this isn't just speculation. In the 1990s, aerospace engineer Christopher Dunn reanalyzed this object and discovered the groove's pitch was incredibly steep. So steep, in fact, that the drill bit would have had to advance into the granite at a rate of 1/10 of an inch per revolution, just like the marks seen in the museum sarcophagus. The implications are enormous. Granite is a mixture of quartz, feldspar, and mica, a crystalline composite that ranks 6 to 7 on the Mohs scale. That makes it harder than steel, let alone copper. So how did a copper tube, as mainstream Egyptology insists, create a perfect descending spiral in a material it shouldn't even be able to cut? Dunn argued that not only was it mechanically impossible, but the groove also showed no signs of chatter, wobble, or inconsistent pressure. In modern terms, it performed like a tool operating under steady machine-regulated torque, something the ancients weren't supposed to have. But what made core number 7 even more baffling was the nature of the spiral itself. Unlike grooves produced by abrasives or erratic wear, this spiral was consistent across the length of the core, as if a lathe or cylindrical boring tool had removed layer after layer with laser precision. Dunn's measurements showed that the groove wasn't random scratching. It had an exact angle of descent, which repeated identically across multiple points of the core. This is behavior only possible with equipment engineered to maintain precise feed control, the kind you'd expect in a modern machining lab, not a desert quarry in 2500 BCE. Even more confusing, the location where the core was found. It was removed from a cutting trench on the Giza Plateau, near other unfinished stone objects that show similar spiral signatures. That means this wasn't an isolated case. It was part of a standardized technique. But where are the tools? No rotating power drills, no advanced tubes, no lathes, nothing that could account for what this core physically proves. The Aswan enigma, the obelisk that revealed the cutting method mid-strike.
The stones are immense, and some of them were cut from a quarry that's hundreds of miles away.
If the drill cores and museum sarcophagus showed the final results of an unknown technology, then the unfinished obelisk at Aswan offers something even rarer. Measuring over 40 meters in length and weighing an estimated 1,200 tons, this colossal granite monolith was never completed. Instead, it still lies half attached to the bedrock, abandoned mid-quarry due to a crack that formed during cutting. But that crack may have preserved something far more important than the obelisk itself: the ancient tool marks that should not exist. When modern engineers visited the quarry, they expected rough surfaces from dolerite pounding stones, the standard theory, or uneven abrasions from copper chisels. Instead, what they found were long, continuous, scooped grooves cut into the sides and beneath the obelisk. These cuts weren't chaotic or hammered. They were smooth, parallel, and concave, as though the granite had been shaved away with a large, stable grinding tool. Some of these grooves even curve under the belly of the obelisk, forming undercuts, a shape physically impossible to create with a handheld dolerite ball. Even more confusing, the trench surrounding the obelisk is too narrow to allow workers to swing tools efficiently. There's no room to generate impact force, yet the walls show perfectly aligned, machine-like scallops, suggesting a cutting motion that applied both downward pressure and lateral control. According to engineer Christopher Dunn, recreating that same curvature with modern tools would require a rotating disc cutter or a high-torque vibrational grinder, both of which use torque-controlled arms to scoop material consistently. Adding to the puzzle, the surfaces of the trench walls and the base of the obelisk show no signs of repetitive percussion. No pitting, no random scarring, no shatter marks from pounding. Instead, the marks are clean and uniform, following a predictable directional pattern that spirals or curves in ways identical to mechanical routing paths in modern stone fabrication. Archaeologists have found dozens of dolerite pounding stones nearby, but none of them show the kind of wear you'd expect from shaping a 1,200-ton monument. In fact, many are oddly intact, suggesting they were placed there rather than used extensively. This raises the possibility that the traditional tools were more symbolic, left behind or introduced later to fit a working theory, while the real method has either been erased from history or was never documented at all. In engineering terms, the obelisk's unfinished state exposes the secret. The cutting was too precise for ancient hand tools, too smooth for random impact, and too geometrically complex to be accidental. The sound that cuts stone, vibrations, resonance, and the Serapeum's secret geometry. If everything we've seen so far, from the precision spirals to the quarry undercuts, points to a lost method of stone cutting, then the Serapeum of Saqqara may offer the biggest clue of all. Deep beneath the desert floor lies a winding tunnel system carved through solid limestone, housing 24 black granite boxes, each weighing 70 to 100 tons. These are not just large, they are absurdly precise. Engineers who inspected the boxes, including Christopher Dunn and physicists from Kemet School, measured their internal walls and found that they were flat to within 2/10,000ths of an inch, more accurate than most aerospace components. But here's where things get even more bizarre: the acoustics. Several researchers, including acoustic engineers, noticed something odd when sound was introduced into the granite boxes. Striking the interior caused pure resonant frequencies to bounce back at high amplitude, as if the box itself was tuned. Some notes vibrated so cleanly that they sustained for several seconds. And when the lids, which weigh over 15 tons each, were lowered, they created what can only be described as a perfect acoustic chamber. This raised a revolutionary question. What if sound wasn't just a side effect of the craftsmanship, but the key to it? Ancient texts in other civilizations often speak of singing stones, or techniques that used vibration to soften or lift massive blocks. At first glance, this sounds like pseudoscience, but modern physics is now catching up. Technologies like ultrasonic drilling and acoustic levitation already exist in our labs. These methods can cut or suspend solid objects using finely tuned frequencies, not blades. If these principles were known, or accidentally discovered, by pre-dynastic builders, it could explain the absence of wear marks, the mirror-like surfaces, and even the internal symmetry seen in the Serapeum. Further evidence comes from the geometry of the boxes. Many are cut into perfect 90-degree angles with seamless interior transitions and no tool chatter. Some edges are so sharp they could draw blood. Yet granite is notorious for its tendency to fracture under uneven vibration. To create these features without splitting the stone would require extremely fine control of energy, either via sustained pressure or harmonic frequencies. Dunn proposed that the boxes may have been carved using a type of resonant cutting method, where frequency-induced vibration weakens molecular bonds just enough to allow precision grinding, a method similar to modern piezoelectric machining. No copper tool, no sand slurry, no dolerite ball could ever replicate this. And curiously, none of these supposed tools were ever found near the Serapeum's cutting chambers. What was found, however, were boxes so finely machined and geometrically perfect that they defy the limitations of even 19th century industrial methods. If this theory holds, it would mean ancient builders may have used frequency as a tool, not as folklore. And it could explain why their most sacred artifacts, from the Serapeum to the so-called tuning forks found in temple ruins, seem designed around resonant properties, not brute force. The Sabu disc, a rotor blueprint buried in stone. Discovered in the tomb of Prince Sabu in 1936, continues to perplex every engineer who's examined it. A strange, wheel-like object carved from metaschist, a brittle, flaky stone that shatters under pressure. It's called the Sabu disc, and to this day no one has been able to explain how it was made, or why it was made to resemble a component pulled straight out of a modern machine. Roughly 61 centimeters in diameter with a central hub, 3 elegantly curved fins, and an outer rim, the disc doesn't resemble anything known in Egyptian religious or symbolic art. It's not a bowl, not a tray, and not ornamental. Its design mimics a rotor or impeller like those used in turbines, centrifugal pumps, or airflow regulators. And here's the catch: the shape isn't just for show. When modern engineers like Robert Bauval and scholars at the Kemet School 3D modeled the object, they discovered that air or fluid passed through the veins in a spiraling flow pattern, reducing drag and generating lift, just like in a functional rotor blade. But how could ancient Egyptians carve thin aerodynamic blades from such a fragile material without snapping it during the process? Metaschist has a tendency to splinter when pressure is uneven, meaning it can't be shaped using hammer strikes or rough chisels. This object had to be lathed, routed, or abraded with controlled force. That leads back to a now familiar question: what tool did they use? Even more curious is the fact that nothing similar has ever been found in Egypt before or since. It's a one-off, a technological anomaly in a tomb belonging to a prince dated to around 3000 BCE, long before any documented machinery existed. Graham Hancock and others have proposed that the Sabu disk may have been a surviving fragment of a mechanical tradition, an object whose function was lost over time, its original use forgotten and reclassified as ritual. And here's where it gets even stranger. Similar rotor-like objects have surfaced in pre-Columbian Bolivia and Mesoamerican temples, carved into stone panels or found in crypts with identical spiral fin geometries. Were these independent coincidences? Or did multiple ancient cultures inherit technological blueprints from a shared earlier source? Skeptics argue it's just a fancy incense burner. But that fails to explain the disk's mathematically curved veins, its central precision hub, or why it mimics the same design logic that modern aerospace engineers use in fluid dynamics optimization. If it was an incense dish, it was one shaped with the aerodynamic intelligence of a jet engine. And if it wasn't, then it may be the most overlooked artifact of lost technology ever pulled from the sands of Egypt. The modern replication problem, when today's tools fall short. After decades of debate and mounting evidence, skeptics challenged Graham Hancock's claims with a simple demand: prove it can't be done. So several labs, engineers, and even TV documentaries stepped up to try just that, to replicate the impossible cuts seen in Egypt's granite artifacts, using only the tools that mainstream archaeology insists were used: copper tube drills, quartz sand, and manual labor. The results? Eye-opening failure. In one of the most cited attempts, engineer Denise Stocks, a staunch defender of the traditional view, spent years testing replicas of copper saws, chisels, and tubular drills using sand as abrasive. With considerable effort and refined technique, his team managed to scratch into limestone and very slowly wear grooves into softer sandstone. But when it came to granite, the progress crawled to a near halt. After hours of consistent labor, even under ideal conditions, the copper tubes had only carved a few millimeters into the surface, and the resulting cuts were rough, inconsistent, and lacked any precision curvature. Nothing like the spiral-drilled granite cores of Giza. What's more, the abrasive particles quickly lost their edge, and the copper bent under pressure. Attempts to maintain a clean borehole failed repeatedly due to wobble, chatter, and tool warping. It became clear, not only was this method inefficient, it also couldn't produce the symmetrical cylindrical drill holes with deep penetration and concentric striations found in ancient granite cores. So researchers turned the challenge around. What if we tried matching those ancient cuts using modern industrial tools instead? Enter diamond-tipped core drills, CNC-guided lathes, and ultrasonic rotary machines. With advanced materials, stable rigs, and consistent speed-torque control, engineers finally managed to replicate the spiral striations and penetration rates observed in artifacts like Petri's core number 7. But here's the punchline. Even with diamond-coated drills and modern torque control, the feed rate was slower than what Hancock and Dunn measured from ancient cores. In some cases, engineers had to dial back their machines just to avoid damaging the granite. Yet the ancient spirals suggested a feed rate that outperformed today's best methods. That raised a disturbing question. If it took diamond tools, industrial equipment, and years of expertise to barely match ancient results, how plausible is it that manual copper tools achieved those same results over 4,000 years ago, and did so with greater precision? Several labs also tried replicating the clean undercut grooves seen at the unfinished obelisk site in Aswan. With precision rotary grinders, they reproduced similar scoops, but only with heavy-duty, angle-controlled robotic arms and vibrational cutters. These machines weighed hundreds of pounds and required steady power sources, the kind of setup you'd never expect to find in a Bronze Age quarry. To date, no modern replication using primitive tools has been able to fully match the speed, cleanliness, or control visible in ancient Egyptian granite work. And that's the paradox. The more modern technology tries to imitate the past, the more it reveals just how far ahead the ancient results truly were. Let us know your theory below. And don't forget to subscribe for more.